Hello everyone, and welcome to the NPC session on open data and open source technology. My name is Tracey Gyateng and I'm a self-confessed data and learning geek and an ex-staffer of NPC. I'm so excited for this session. I've even wore my favorite t-shirt which says data for good. So hopefully everyone will be as excited about this session as I am. Please do introduce yourself in the chat using the chat function. So you might want to say who you are, where you're from, what the weather is like today, and at the end of the session, I think Rosario is going to provide a live map of all the weather report of the UK. Only joking, but Rosario does have the skills to do that. That's one of the wonders of data that we can do. Can I remind you that this session is being recorded? We know data can be super exciting, but just a reminder to everyone, keep the chat clean. And also journalists are attending. So do make a note that everything that we say is going to be on record. So we're going to have a number of presentations, some clips which are going to be illustrated and bringing to life data and what it can do. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. So as we're going along, please post all your questions in the Q&A box or use the chat function, put them all in, and we're going to try to get to as many of them towards the end of the session. So, and of course, one last thing, we're also using social media. So do broadcast your thoughts as well using the hashtag NPC Ignites. With that, I'm just going to get started. Just to give a little bit of an introduction, this session is really about getting insight from data. It's not just about celebrating data because it's awesome, which I just generally think, but it's about how useful and practical and what can be done with it. We're going to be looking at open data, which I'm sure many of you know is data that's freely available to use and reuse and distribute. And also about open source technology, which is about basically code that you can kind of make and use and add to yourself. So with open data, I think it's a concept that's been around for a while now, and certainly around 2010, 2013, there was much hype around it, and especially in civil society. We saw the formation of great organizations such as 360given or Open Data Manchester, DataKind UK, and even within NPC, there was the start of Data Labs, which was a program to support charities to access government administrative data to support their evaluation work. In my opinion, much of the buzz started to die down, and for some organizations, making use of data was a wonderful extra that they didn't have the time to engage with or sadly were funded to do, especially some of these organizations were largely paper-based. But COVID-19, with all the horrors it's brought us, has also acted as a catalyst for many organizations to make their services and campaigns more open than ever. And there has been a fast movement towards the use of digital technology, which in turn will generate more data that can be turned into useful information to improve our services, collaborate and campaign. So with that, I'm excited to hear more from our great panel today who are making the most use of data, and they're going to show us how they're doing that and how others can also benefit from this as well. So we have Joe Kerr, Director of Impact and Innovation at Turn to Us, Billy Wright, who's the Non-Executive Director of Brevio, who has stepped in on behalf of Phil Hodgson, Chief Exec of Brevio, who's sadly unwell, and from NPC, Rosario, who leads on NPC's data work. So without much ado, let's start the conversation with Joe, who will tell us about Turn to Us and how this great organization has been gaining and sharing insight from their data.
Thank you so much, Tracey. Your t-shirt is proving very popular in the chat, so I don't have any exciting clothing to share, but I will share the story of the journey that Turn to Us is on around data and insight in this space. So I only have 2 slides. We can go to the first one. And I've got a bit of a context around Turn to Us and what we do. You might have heard of us, you might be familiar with us. a fifth of the population live in poverty, and we believe that that is not right, that that is unjust. And Turn to Us provides the resources and support that people can use, both information and online tools, and also some financial support that can help people in poverty and financial hardship, particularly in the face of life-changing events. And COVID-19 is a life-changing event for many of us, but particularly for people who have maybe been on the edge of poverty, on the edge of financial hardship. We are a historic organisation, or over 120 years old, but we are embracing digital and data innovation. The organisation described itself as digital first in 2010, which I really like. I think within the charity sector, that's quite a rare thing to be pushing forward on a digital and data agenda. And we very much tackle the causes and symptoms of poverty, but we are a relatively small organisation in relation to the size of the problem. Kind of income of around 9 million a year in the face of 14.2 million people in poverty in the UK. We cannot tackle the causes and symptoms of poverty alone, so we have to do that in collaboration. And collaboration around data and open data is a huge opportunity for us. So if we look at the combination of COVID-19 as a huge life-changing event for very many people, and a huge opportunity for collaboration being around data, you start to see where I'm going. And we'll go over to the next slide, 2 of 2. The third piece of the puzzle is our benefits calculator. So I mentioned we have a lot of information available through our website. We also have 2 main tools. A grant search tool that helps people find grants that individuals can apply for. That's really helpful if someone's in crisis, or if they have a really unexpected expenditure, they can apply for a grant either through Turn to Us or another organisation. So that's the grant search. The bigger tool, though, is our benefits calculator, used by over 1.5 million people last year. And over 200,000 of those people went on to claim a new benefit. And that then ends up being 1.2 billion in additional benefits claimed. So kind of amazing. So if you want to prove your impact, that's a great proof of impact just there. But the data that we collect is really, really rich. Because in order to understand if somebody could claim a new benefit, we need to understand their current financial situation, we need to understand their family size and what's going on there in their household. And we're also then linking all of that data to postcode area, local authority area. So you end up having a real geographical spread of that data across the whole of the UK. And if you add in, as I mentioned, the grant search tool as well, which is also used by hundreds of thousands of people a year, we're seeing even more information about people's current financial situation and other demographic information that makes that even more rich. So, Turn to Us for a number of years have been capturing that information. But maybe, although I'm very pleased to say we've been storing it and managing it in a responsible way, which is obviously an important part of the data picture, we haven't been doing anything particularly ambitious with that data. And so the beginning of the year is when I joined the organisation in my current role. Clearly, we realised there was more that we could do. And I think that was understood to be as an important priority strategically, but we hadn't necessarily had the knowledge and skills in the organisation up until that point. So that's when we started to have conversations with others, including NPC. And the start of the pandemic was really that clarion call to say, we can understand a lot about people's financial situations as Turn to Us with the data that we collect, but that will only ever be one lens. For a start, we have digital services. So if you don't have digital skills, and we know that there is a real correlation between poverty and financial exclusion and a lack of digital skills, so potentially we are not reaching lots of people at the moment who are experiencing issues. So we can only see one lens in that perspective. There are other barriers to access that we might not currently be overcoming. So who can we partner with? Who can we work with that might have a wider lens or have a different lens? And that's where we started a project with MPC called the Needs Analysis Project. We are looking for a new name, so that might be something that comes out in the Q&A. We might think of a better name for this project, but the framing is around understanding the needs of people and communities through the pandemic and afterwards. And we want to focus primarily on financial hardship and poverty, using the data from our benefits calculator, but also other organisations' data. So we're already working with Buttle UK, who are another grant maker. We're working with the British Gas Energy Trust, and looking to incorporate data from Step Change and many other organisations. Because we know that once we start to make, and we have already started to make a dashboard available, which Rosario will talk about, it's a really exciting opportunity for us to broaden that lens, see what people's real needs are, and then start to, as a collective, shape insights, shape policy recommendations, shape potential new programs within all of our organizations that are really led by data and led by the picture of need on the ground. So I'll leave it there for now, but it's a really exciting project and a key part of how we are expanding our understanding of data maturity at Turn to Us, working in the frame of open data.
Great, thank you, Jo. Just really struck by that number of sort of 232,000 people being able to claim a new benefit. That's just really amazing. And also for people watching this, if you can help Jo with having a nice, innovative, fun name apart from Needs Analysis Project, I think she'd welcome that too. So do stick your ideas into the chat. Next we have Billy. Oh, Billy, yes. And Billy is going to talk to us a bit about the Brevio, which is an organisation that's really kind of set up to try and increase the efficiency and to kind of reduce the burden of sort of grant seeking and grant giving.
Thank you very much, Tracy. So yes, hello, my name is Billy Wright. I'm standing in for Phil Hodgson, the CEO of Brevio, who unfortunately is feeling particularly under the weather today, so I said I would jump in. So I joined Brevio around 18 months ago. I sit on the board and I've been closely involved in the development of the platform from its early ideation to its launch. It's live, launched only a couple of months ago. I'm an electronic engineer by background, and through my career I've tended to focus on leading teams and businesses navigating sort of digital disruption and transformation, so that seems quite relevant to the third sector at the moment and this conference specifically. I've worked across financial services and sort of tech, media, telco in global roles for organizations such as HSBC and Samsung and Microsoft and Warner Brothers and Orange, or EE as they are today. So I think there's some quite interesting analogies between the way some of those sectors and organizations have had to embrace data and evolve. And I was particularly drawn to working with Brevio, primarily because of the amazing track record of Brevio's founder, Marcel Speller, who I'm sure many will know very well. But I also wanted to apply some of the knowledge I'd gained in more commercial organizations to the charitable sector, in the hope that I could actually make a bit of a difference myself, specifically related to improving impact on the ground. First slide, please, if that's okay. So why open data? And this gives the context for Brevio. So obviously, open data enables better, faster, and more insight-driven decision-making. And open data can be an agent of change, providing greater clarity to what's happening across the whole sector. At a very simplified level, we can consider the charitable sector as operating across a life cycle where data is generated and insights are required at each stage. And you could break those stages down again in a very simplified way. Where is the need? Who can fund and deliver against that need? What has actually been funded and what was the impact? And if data was openly available at each of those stages of the life cycle, it would enable the sector to become more efficient, and it would deliver greater impact with what will always end up being a constrained supply of money and resource. So obviously maximizing the impact of that supply is ultimately what we're trying to do. And obviously, if you can get that right, then it creates a bit of a virtuous circle, in that more data generates finer insights, and those insights will go on to improve decision making. So over time, money and resource should increasingly flow to the highest priority causes, and the impact should obviously follow. Organisations across the sector, should be in a stronger position to evaluate policy or to grant success, and to show with confidence that their actions have made a real difference if this sort of virtuous circle and the data that sits underneath it is enabled. And obviously this is a sector-wide challenge. Brevio is only focused on one of those stages, and it's really the fund and delivery sort of stage. And other organisations such as MPC and Turn to Us are obviously needed for the sector to achieve some of these benefits, at scale and across all stages of that life cycle. So let me switch and talk about, well, what is Brevio doing specifically? So next slide, thank you. So Brevio has been set up to solve a very specific problem. We conducted a lot of research with the University of Bath, going back sort of 24, 36 months. And we found that on average, charities apply for around 22 grants per year. And each grant takes around 19 hours to write and submit. So if you just look at registered charities and the paid staff time within those registered charities, this actually equates up to around just over £1 billion per year that is spent in writing grant applications. And obviously what makes that number particularly scary is that 66% of those grant applications fail. And this obviously is real money. This is money that's coming directly from foundations and trusts. It's money that's coming through public donations. And arguably, it could be better utilised to help communities and causes rather than being spent on administration. But given that charities, obviously rely on grant funding for their survival, in the current environment, they have no choice but to allocate paid staff time to writing grant applications. And obviously, it's not just charities that struggle. Everyone struggles with the current process. Charities having to make multiple applications, the majority of which are asking the exact same questions, but in a multitude of different ways and formats, and the majority of which fail. And funders are consistently overwhelmed or oversubscribed to the point of being overwhelmed in obviously dealing with that sort of flow of applications. Now, this isn't a new issue at all. This level of wastage in the grant application and management process has been openly discussed across the sector since around the 1980s. But really in the intervening 40 years, very little has changed. But what really has changed is in the last 9 months, we've obviously all had to deal with the perfect storm that's been created by COVID, by the pandemic. And clearly that has enormously amplified the issue. So we all know we need to deal firsthand with significant numbers of staff being furloughed. I think it's expected around 60,000 redundancies may end up happening across the sector. And all of this obviously at a time when there's the highest demand for services that there really has been, that there ever has been. So the timing for the implementation of digital solutions that leverage data and allow better decision making, and they reduce wastage and inefficiency is obviously even more critical than it was before. So the next slide, please. So this talks about the Brevio solution, and the Brevio solution is not radical. It's actually a blindingly obvious solution. It's a digital platform that matches charities to funders. So organisations are matched based on shared questions that are commonly asked by funders in their grant application forms, and this could include basic information on the organisation. Could include questions around governance systems and processes, around finances, and of course, detail around the funding need. So that could be a project cost or core cost or any number of other funding needs. And through around 24 months of research and development, where we've consulted very widely across charities and grant makers, big and small, we've created this question set which matches funders to charities, and funders have described Brevio as game changing and the future of grant making, and charities have really asked us to do what we can to get more funders to sign up to the platform, given that they can see the benefits. Could we go to the next slide, please? So here I'll just start to describe a couple of the features. So 2 screenshots on one slide, charity dashboard on the left and the funders dashboard on the right. So for charities, the key features are you make one application, so you fill that in once. And with that application and baseline data, you can apply for as many funding needs as you like, so project costs, core costs, etc. Each application that you make is matched with all eligible funders. And once you're matched, a charity can apply with just a couple of clicks. And Brevio will automatically pre-populate questions and pull data from existing open sources where they're available, such as the Charities Commission, which again reduces some of the administrative overhead that you would otherwise have to deal with. Charities can very precisely stipulate their beneficiaries and their focus areas and location for all of the services that they're applying for funding for. And through that, Brevio will obviously provide or can provide huge time saving for charities, meaning more time is spent on the end beneficiary. And then thinking more about funders, so some of the key features for funders, funders only receive eligible applications, so applications that are closely aligned to their eligibility criteria, reduces some of the flow of non-eligible applications in. And Brevio, most importantly, seamlessly integrates into the existing grant management systems, processes, and workflows. This isn't a separate process and workflow. You integrate Brevio into your existing workflow, but then your workflow is only exposed to grants that are eligible for the fund that you've posted. Also, Brevio can be directly integrated into a funder's website, so the same capability could be exposed directly through your website. I like to use sort of a couple of analogies when describing the key features of Brevio, sort of bring it to light. One is UCAS, and the other is sort of digital dating. So UCAS, as I'm sure everyone knows, revolutionized the university application process by streamlining submission, offer, and acceptance for both students and institutions. So UCAS significantly reduced waste and inefficiency in the system by unifying data and processes at real scale. And that's precisely what Brevio is trying to do with the grant application process. But it's actually trying to do something else as well. And this is where the sort of dating app analogy comes in. So dating apps significantly increase the number of potential matches, and particularly matches that are outside of your immediate social circle. So outside of the obvious people that you would potentially know or meet or come across. And dating apps make data-driven matches, which in the past would have been very unlikely because of, say, geographic or social constraints. And Brevio is trying to do and is doing the same thing. So Brevio, the platform, makes connections between funders and charities that are always and only matched, but in many cases are entirely new and will not have been seen before. So next and final slide, if that's okay. So in terms of sort of benefits or summary, so the work we've been doing with the University of Bath, that just over £1 billion that's spent on the grant matching and application process, the administration. We see that around 80% saving. So that nets out, we end up working out at about 880 million every year could be saved from administration and used for impact. And Brevio can also free charities from the administration task, providing around a 7% productivity uplift. And again, that can be better spent benefiting local communities and causes. And finally, standardized data provides greater clarity and helps the sector make better data-informed decisions that will obviously be of value to all stakeholders. Thank you very much. I hope that's a useful summary of the Brevio platform and particularly how Brevio is leveraging data.
Great, thanks, Billy. Yeah, really showcasing the efficiency savings that can be made if we were able to kind of streamline the grant giving and seeking process. And I think it's much in line with some of the work that's taken place between funders and charities. I'm thinking about some of the work from IVAR, Institute Voluntary of Action Research, that are doing some work with funders, exploring how to reduce the burden on charities, and very much in line with the work that NPC has done over the years on this project. With that, last but not least, we have Rosario, who's going to be talking about some of the barriers and opportunities and uses of open data.
Thank you, Tracey. And thank you, Joe and Billy, for your contribution. Really interesting facts and stats there. Being a data lead at MPC obviously means I'm a data geek, and every time I see figures, I get really excited. So a brief introduction about myself. I joined MPC around March last year. Before that, I was Impact and Evaluation Manager for other children and young people's charities, working across the UK. My background is in forensic psychology, where the passion for data and analysis come from. And NPC, I deal with anything that has to do with data. So from internal implementation of skills on to working with on projects with a variety of clients that NPC interacts with. Chances are that if you're here today, you're really familiar with the work that NPC does, but for those of you who are not familiar with NPC, we are a charity first and foremost, and we support the sectors from charities to trust and foundations and philanthropists through consultancy, innovation, and think tank work. More recently, I've been heavily involved with a new tool that we have released right after the pandemic started, and it's a dashboard that we have developed in collaboration with Turn to Us Battle UK, and that was funded by the Health Foundation. And there will be later on an opportunity for you guys to have a look at what these platforms we've been referring to, what they look like. But for now, I would just say that what we did was basically trying to support funders and charities in their decision-making process by combining official statistics, open source data available out there with data that was provided directly by charities in the attempt to monitor what was the level of demand and need at local level, and how that compared with the official statistics already available out there pre-COVID about the level of need and the socioeconomic characteristics of the people across the country. I would like to go back very quickly to what was effectively the main question of the session today, which is why open data. And I would like to focus mostly on what are the barriers, some of which are arguably historical barriers, and what are the opportunities now more than ever when it comes to open data and the use of open source information. So as Tracey said in the opening statement, open data is not really a new thing. It's been around for a while, but we haven't really done much with it. And the reason for that are I mean, we could come up with a long list of reasons, but I try to summarize what I believe are the kind of strongest barriers for the sector to be able to make the most out of this kind of resources and tools. And first of all, which has been mentioned by Billy and Joe as well, it revolves around data standards and their taxonomy. So the best way I could describe this is like the Tower of Babel syndrome, which is basically when different people are describing exactly the same phenomenon using different labels, different definitions, and different measures, but in reality they are talking about the same thing, whether it's issues, the characteristics of the beneficiaries that you support, etc. There is a lack of benchmarking and evidence. It's really hard to compare what sort of impact you are achieving, whether it's positive or negative, if there is no existing data or information available out there for you to refer to. Data maturity, which obviously goes from leadership all the way down to frontline workers, is an issue. And then there is a fear of judgment and failure, really. So this kind of risk aversion towards being really open and vocal about the things that we do on a daily basis through our programs or grant giving. And obviously data culture and the level of trust towards this kind of huge amount of information available out there, whether it's reliable or not. And quite often innovation is not necessarily a priority for all the reasons that we know. It's costly, it's demanding, and we don't often have the resources and capacity to implement innovation. But I do believe that with challenges and opportunity comes opportunities, really, and we can overcome these barriers, which is what we've been trying to do with this new dashboard, but also what we're doing individually, not just kind of collectively in a collaborative way. And I think the real value of using open source data and platforms and tools that rely on that kind of data is the opportunity to increase our ability to monitor in real time the level of demand, our programs are doing, what is the level of need, both locally and nationally. And this can only lead to adaptive programming, which is something that we don't necessarily prioritize. By which I mean, imagine if you could use real-time data to understand whether you're achieving the outcomes and impact that you hope to achieve, and also to tweak your programs accordingly in case there's something that is not, maybe is not working. Open source data can definitely improve our ability to use more evidence and better. It can increase collaboration and networking, particularly for those voluntary sector organizations that are working or tackling the same kind of issues. It can only lead to better impact measurement techniques and therefore increase our effectiveness, both individually and collectively. And then obviously there is a question of transparency. And I will add to this the ability for the sector to be even more vocal and proud about the work that we do on a daily basis. And I would like to, before we go into the video clips, I would like to I tried to summarize in one slide what was the ideal outcome. What would happen in the ideal world if we start using more open source data, but also if we start sharing a bit more the data that we collect on a daily basis. And reality is it's a healthy and kind of synchronized and harmonized ecosystem where in the ideal world you have trust foundation and philanthropists communicating and using the same language, if you like, with charities and voluntary sector organizations. And same goes for those organizations working directly with beneficiaries, and then all this information will be fed back to funders and charities as well. And what I mean here is not necessarily a picture. There is, for the whole sector, I think this could work at a kind of micro level to begin with, whether you're working with a specific number of organizations locally, maybe rather than nationally. And ultimately, to kind of build on what Billy was saying, open source and the practice of sharing more data can only drive knowledge and efficiency and impact ultimately, both collectively and overall. So I'll shut up now. I'm conscious of time. You heard about those platforms, the benefit calculator, Brevio, and the MPC dashboard. So now we are going to show you what these platforms look like, starting with Brevio.
where Brevio can help.
Sorry, just having technical issue. Can I make sure that you can hear the audio okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry.
But obviously it's just buffering. So.
Okay. I mean, just to clarify, all these slides and videos will be available later on for all of you.
Writing grant applications,
working fine now.
66% of which fail. That's £726 million a year in wasted time and effort. This is what leading academics from the University of Bath with Brevio found in their recent study. And this is where Brevio can help. Our solution is simple. A matchmaking site for charities and funds. We've created a platform that delivers a standardized application process. We've removed the pain and wasted time and created a system that benefits everyone. For charities, it's designed with your vital time in mind, so you can concentrate on what really matters, driving your charity's real purpose. One profile, one easy-to-use application form. Brevio will automatically show you every fund you're eligible for, and you decide which to apply for. Funders get a set of tools that enable you to sharpen your focus and make even smarter decisions. You can flex your criteria in real time and be matched with only eligible charities, including ones which are new to you, so you can focus on building those relationships stronger. Funders make the final granting decisions using their grant management system. It's an easy step-by-step approach to managing and submitting grant applications. Brevio's collaboration with funders and charities means we're constantly improving and adding features to create a world-leading intuitive platform that will reshape the grant-making process for the third sector. Grow your network and save time and money. Sign up to Brevio for free now and lead the change.
Great, so we're going to move on to the next one, and now it's the benefit calculator.
Turn to Us is a national charity that offers practical information, support and direct financial assistance to people facing financial shocks that may arise from life-changing events, such as job loss, illness or bereavement. We deliver two tools to the public, the Grant Search and the Benefits Calculator. We'll be looking today at the Benefits Calculator. Almost 3 million people per year use our Benefits Calculator to check what benefits they might be entitled to. The benefit system is very complicated, and our calculator works, more or less, by comparing what the benefit rules deem a claimant needs to live off with what the benefit rules deem them to have as capital and as income. With all the benefit system's complexities, we have to gather a lot of information about users to be able to calculate their benefit entitlement. In total, the calculator has around 300 questions, though no user would ever see all of these. For this demonstration of the tool, I'm going to run through a calculation for someone aged 34, living in London, with one child who has a disability and working part-time. So, she's not a student, not receiving benefits at the moment, born 1st of January 1986, she's female, not disabled, and not a carer. She doesn't live with a partner. She isn't sick with COVID. She has one child and isn't a foster carer. She lives in private rented accommodation, but as you can see, we're taking data on a lot of different living arrangements. We have to take her full postcode to be able to work out her benefits correctly, but this also means we know pretty precisely where our users are. Here, again, you can see we cover a lot of different employment statuses, but she's just going to enter that she's employed. Now, as she entered that she has a child, the calculator has to ask some more questions about that child. It's a girl, born the 1st of January 2016, and the child has a disability. So now you can see that some more questions are shown about the child's disability. She isn't blind, the mother is claiming a benefit for the child, and that benefit is disability living allowance. She's getting the lower rate of the mobility component and the higher rate of the care component, and she doesn't need an extra bedroom. Now, we skip over the disability questions, as this user has already told us she has no disability, and we go straight to questions about her home. She doesn't have any non-dependents, boarders or subtenants. Her rent is £380 per week. Now, to get the LHA rate, usually we'd need her to go to an external website, but we'll shortcut that. In Hammersmith and Fulham, the LHA for a 2-bed property is £339.45 per week. And she's in Band B for council tax, and she pays £1,500 per year. She is in work, and she earns £120 per week before tax and national insurance. She isn't getting any other income at all, and she doesn't have property she doesn't live in. She has savings of £580 in total. After entering all this information, users are taken through to the results page. The journey for users of the tool doesn't end at this calculation. We provide information on how to claim the benefits we've worked out for them, and it's also from here that they can talk on web chat with our helpline, go back and check their calculation, check what additional help they might be able to access, check what would happen if they increased their hours at work, or find suitable advice.
And finally, this is the dashboard I've been referring to, something that at NPC we decided to create to help funders and charities to improve the decision making and use evidence that was already available out there, plus data provided directly from charities.
Hello, my name is Tom Collins. I'm the Policy Manager at charity think tank NPC. And in this video today, I'm going to be showing you around the COVID-19 data dashboard that we at NPC have put together in partnership with our friends at the Health Foundation, Turn to Us, and Butter UK. The goal of this data dashboard is to take publicly available and charity information on the potential picture in demand created by COVID-19 and the risk created from COVID-19 in the country and put it into an accessible format that charities and funders can use to shape their decision making. This is the COVID tracker. This is where you will find yourself when you first navigate to the data dashboard. But before we get into too much detail about this and what it all means, just want to say a little bit about the data that underwrites all this, where we got it from and why we chose it. So there's a tab here called Data Source. And this is essentially a list of all the different data which is included within the dashboard. Now, the data that we chose based on our understanding of the risks presented by the virus at the time that we were putting this together. It's roughly divided between economic risk data, and which mostly focuses on the index of multiple deprivation. We know deprived communities are likely to be hit hardest by any kind of economic shock, and health-related data, which includes things like high-risk health conditions as defined by Public Health England, for high risk in relation to COVID-19, as well as age, as we know that older people have a higher risk from the virus. So if we now return back to the main tracker, you can see some of the features that we've got here. We have a regional and national summary of the cases, the infection rate per 100,000 people, and the change on, in this case, I believe it's the change on the 29th of September, which was the time before this data was picked up. We have a map of the UK, which you can see here. And we also have the 20 most affected areas in the UK. So just looking at this brief summary, we can see that at the time that this data was taken down, 5th of October, the situation in the northwest was the most concerning in England. So from here, we have three further, more specific dashboards. One looks at elderly groups, one looks at different ethnic groups, and one looks at lone parents. So we're going to navigate now to ethnic groups. And now that's loaded in, I'm going to navigate to the northwest of England. Currently, the regional summaries under these different dashboards only cover England. The team are working hard to include Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, and the regions within those different devolved nations as well. But here we are, we see these different regional summaries, and here, unlike the previous screen, we have some information on the local population density, we have some health related information, as well as the COVID information that we saw before. So scrolling down, we can see the data we've been talking about plotted against different local authorities within the region. So here we see the rate of infection, here we see the rate of death, and here in these large bars we see the BAME population. With some degree of breakdown within that BAME population. We have a much more detailed breakdown within that BAME population in the CSV.
Great, thanks for those clips.
File, which comes with the dashboard. And just very quickly, I'm just going to scroll up and show you where that is. That's here. That's on the full.
You know, I think it gives a flavor of what the dashboard is about. I really would like to give people the opportunity to ask questions. But just finally on that, I wanted to add that in the slides that we will make available for everyone, there's plenty of links to other existing platforms, some of which are COVID related, others cover different areas, health, social impact investment, etc.
Great, thank you. So we've got 10 minutes left for all these great questions. We're going to try and rapidly go through as many as we can. So if we can keep our responses to be as succinct as possible. I wanted to go back to some of the barriers that you highlighted, Rosario, which I agreed with all of them. And I could see someone in the chat said they were nodding their head vigorously with all of them, and they're true. And certainly in my experience, one of the key barriers is about culture in your organization. So the culture that for the organization to use data and having leadership who's interested in that and is engaged and willing to experiment. So I'd love to hear from you and the rest of the panel, maybe certainly starting off perhaps with Joe first and then Rosario, Billy, about about these barriers and how can we change and overcome these barriers? How do we get the sector more excited and engaged and change cultures within organizations and within leaders ourselves? Either you can talk about the work you're doing now or lessons you've learned over time.
Absolutely. I think it's the most important question, actually. And I've been exploring this, I think, with colleagues at Turn to Us more recently, that we have these concepts around open data. As you say, they've been around for probably about 10 years now in the sector and discussed. Why haven't we taken action? And I think it's about knowledge and it's about confidence. And if I look at what has happened around digital transformation in the sector over the last 10 years, not to say that we've got all the way to where we need to get to, or maybe we never will, but digital maturity is a concept that people are much more comfortable with, and funding for digital projects and products is coming through now. And we probably need to just go on that journey a bit more with data and data maturity that we have gone on for digital and digital maturity. And I was looking at, it's a really good tool from the States, I think, from the Sunlight Foundation. They put together an open data maturity scale. And a lot, when you look at the factors for open data maturity, yes, a lot of these things there are technical considerations, and there are systems considerations, but it's all about people. The tricky things are always about people, and it's about senior leadership confidence and understanding and translating these concepts into something that's, we're clearly articulating the benefits. And I think, hopefully I did a little of that in just talking about the Turn to Us experience, and Billy did that from his perspective. But in every subsector of social impact, there are clear benefits, and there are clear examples now of what can be done. And I think it's about coming back to those and telling that story.
Great, thank you. Anyone else from the panel would like to respond to that?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And I think if I look at the experience I've had in other industries that aren't, that are quite removed really from the third sector, from the charitable sector, the same issues always emerge. And if you want to make these large sort of digital transformation, data-driven changes, you end up with sort of three major buckets of activity to address. One is really around the technology, the tech. The second is really around governance and regulation, because undoubtedly, if you expose more data, then you need to think very carefully about who that is exposed to and how it's controlled and managed and audited. And then the third is really around sort of culture and ways of working. And oftentimes people will look to solve the problem in that order. They'll think about the tech, they'll think about the regulation, but they'll leave culture until the end. But to pick up on Joe's point, it's actually completely the other way around. It's really about understanding the impact on ways of working, and particularly power bases, established power bases in an organization or in a sector. It's also then obviously about understanding what new governance and regulation should be considered and implemented, and how that will be sort of managed. And almost lastly, it's the technology. The technology is often the easiest thing to do. But coming particularly to where we are here today, I think if the third sector was much more open with data, obviously it would mean that organizations on both the funding and the charity side would need to stand behind and be very confident in the decisions that they were making and the impact that they were delivering. And I think in some cases that isn't always, I'm not trying to point fingers at anyone, but I think that creates questions. How comfortable are funders and charities to really exposing some of the decisions and the money flows and the impacts? Because once you start implementing a more open data approach, not just in the area that Brevio is looking at, but across that whole life cycle, you do expose people to having to be much more open about how they're managing their organizations. That's the cultural piece. That's the bigger challenge. The other pieces will follow.
Hey, Rosario.
I'll be very brief. The secret ingredient, in my opinion, is open and honest conversation internally, first of all, and then maybe the other element, which is very close to it, it's there is a need for clarity around what are the benefits of using data. And there are different benefits depending on what is your role within the organization, from senior management to frontline workers. So discussing this together collectively can pave the way for open data, the use of data in general, to be much more effective and to support decision making.
Great, thank you. And on that note, that leads to another question about the collaborative use of data. So Nikki asks, there's a lot of talk of a move towards better partnership working between funders and delivery charities, which seem positive. What do panelists feel would be the role of data in all of this? Okay,
Who wants to go first? I can start. It's a really good question. The role of data, again, it's what do we mean by data? Data is the information that we use to monitor, adapt, and change. And if we use that as a kind of common ground or the basis to create a common language, way of referring to whether it's the need, the demand, the programs, the grants, etc., that can be an enabling factor to ensure that communication is a lot more clear, honest, and direct, and much more effective overall.
Great, thank you.
I think the only thing I'd add to that is that data is only useful if it generates actionable insights. There's no point having a wonderful SQL Server database unless you can actually derive some useful insights from it. It sort of comes back to the point I made earlier. If the sector is more open with its data within the right regulatory and compliance sort of frameworks, it allows people from within and outside the sector to generate insights around particularly the flow of money and the impact that that is delivering. And ultimately, that's what we're all interested in, because we are operating in a constrained environment. There isn't a limitless source of funds. There aren't a limitless source of individuals who can deliver into the communities and beneficiaries that we want to support. So we need to prioritize and make sensible and strong and auditable decisions, if you like, around how that money is allocated, how those resources are allocated. And data is ultimately what allows you to do that. And picking up on Rosario's really critical point, it's not just the insight, it's also the language and the consistency. So are we all talking about the same thing when we talk about impact, or when we talk about a particular set of beneficiaries, or whatever it may be?
Thanks, Billy. With 1 minute, I'm really keen to add this question in, which is from Hazel, a small parochial place-based funder. And if anything, I think it really highlights the importance of collecting more granular data. And actually, it highlights the importance of what data you collect and who collects it, and how do we ensure that we're collecting relevant data for everyone, even smaller organizations, those that are often left out. Does anyone have a response to that, in terms of perhaps thinking about how you can ensure that the data that you're collecting is really representative of the people you're working with?
I don't know if this answers the question directly, but sort of.
No, perhaps, maybe.
Sorry?
Just, two things.
Oh,
the first one is that we know that the most vulnerable people will be the people whose data we are least likely to collect. So looking at how do we design data collection that will access those people, and then how can we be broad and also deep in certain areas, and that's something I'm really interested in with the needs analysis project, new name TBC, that we could look at particular locations to go very deep into how we understand those locations, and maybe have particular hotspots or pilot areas there, and then be broad across the whole of the UK. So we've got that approach too, and that might be a way forward. But yeah, I definitely think that is such an interesting area. I could have a whole session just on that.
Sorry, we're out of time now, I'm afraid. So, Billy, I'm sorry, I've had to cut you off on there. It's, as you say, I'm sure you'll know, we could talk about data for ages. And do feel free to follow up with some of the panelists. I'm sure Billy and Brevio would be keen to answer some of the questions that we had, especially about how open data was used. Billy, we had a question there. And just generally about how, as a sector, we try and overcome some of these barriers and make better use of our data, and very keen to watch the work that NPC in turn to us are doing. So for now, I think thank you very much for everyone that was listening. Thank you again, our panelists, for sharing all your wisdom and insight. Do please keep on following NPC and the NPC Ignites, and I think at 2 o'clock the next session will start. So thank you once again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Take
Bye.
care.
Bye-bye.